Husbands podcast, where we share ideas from experts to manage money and the home as teammates. Today, we will discuss with Dr. Lutter how to reduce money-induced stress and anxiety in relationships. Sonya Lutter holds a Ph.D., CFP, and LMFT and serves as the inaugural Director of Financial Health and Wellness at Texas Tech University. She leads curriculum and continuing education opportunities in the areas of financial psychology, financial therapy, and financial behavior. Dr. Lutter is also the owner of EnLite.World, a research and training consultancy firm for financial planners and therapists. Her work is regularly featured in major news outlets such as the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Dr. Lutter will share how money-induced stress and anxiety impact marriage, and 3 specific and easy steps we can take to do something about it. But before we get to that, Dr. Lutter, how does your professional background provide you with the unique insight to understand how to reduce money-induced stress and anxiety in relationships?
Yeah, I think I got here accidentally, and that's also a fun way to get here. But I went to school to be a speech language pathologist. If you do not know what this is, it requires a lot of anatomy, biology, etc. And I was not really fantastic in those courses. So I moved over into financial planning. So the whole reason I got into financial planning was totally by accident. But then once I got there, I realized how much of money conversations relate to stress and conflict, especially among couples. And I was not prepared to deal with that graduating from college. So I sort of took the easy route, in my opinion, and continued on with school. And I went into a marriage and family therapy program. And it was such a fascinating experience to hear my colleagues in therapy, Bruce, you can relate to this. And they were terrified of talking about money whenever their clients came in. And even if this was the presenting problem or the thing that the couple really wanted to discuss is getting on the same page with their personal financial goals or conversations, my colleagues didn't know how to deal with that. This was a long time ago. I think it's changed since then. Meanwhile, here I am talking with my former colleagues, my former student peers, and they're out working as financial advisors, and they are terrified of talking about the emotional stuff. And one of my friends went so far as to say a couple came in and one of them started crying. So he just closed the meeting and rescheduled it for a different time. Again, it is a long time ago. So I do believe things have changed on both sides. But that was really enlightening for me in terms of how little we know about couples and relationships and their dynamics around money. And so this has really guided my entire career and my research agenda and looking at money arguments early on in the relationship and how that predicts later relationship satisfaction and divorce and all sorts of fun stuff that we now know that we didn't know 20 years ago, and so much more that we don't know, perhaps that we don't know.
You've talked about, how it's changed over these years. I am curious, just kind of as a follow-up, how has your own practice changed? Implementing these kind of things, especially when you're working with relationships.
Financial wellness as being an issue that's tied to a specific socioeconomic status. And I think we all have different ideas of who needs financial therapy or improvements in their financial wellness the most. And the people that I have talked to have extreme differences in their financial status. I think we're talking about people who one-income earner households, and they're not scraping by, but they also are not buying the luxury things or even attending to a lot of their needs or a lot of their wants. They're meeting their needs, but not necessarily wants. And then your typical middle income household who is doing well, they're getting along, they're meeting all of the recommended financial ratios, but they're still struggling to find financial freedom, if you will, and wanting to not have to live in a way that restrains their current financial situation. They're doing quite well for long-term financial well-being, but they're struggling to figure out how to make that work right now and what that means for their relationship and things that they might be able to give and take for that. And then also working with couples who have more wealth than they know what to do with, and yet their financial well-being is also suffering. And so, I mean, you've got it all the way along the spectrum in terms of people are searching for fulfillment, but we don't necessarily know how to find that fulfillment from a financial perspective. And I would venture to say holistic well-being, we're struggling to find that fulfillment in our lives.
But we're getting better with it with help of like financial therapists, right?
For sure. I think that's huge, Bruce. But also, I would put in there that COVID really helped us too. COVID really helped us identify what was bringing us happiness, one. Also, COVID really helped us take a step back and look at our own well-being. And we are now much more willing to talk about mental health than what we were pre-COVID. And it was almost like a light switch went off to where people are now saying, yeah, I'm burnt out, or yes, I am anxious, or yes, I'm feeling down or depressed or lonely. That didn't happen pre-COVID at the length that it's happening now. And so that's good. But it's also really fantastic because now people are willing to go to a financial therapist or anything that ends with therapist. We're willing to recognize that I do need help and I'm willing to seek help as a result of that. Just thinking about all the online therapy platforms, financial therapy or otherwise, they experienced extreme increases during COVID.
Yeah, there's been a huge rise of virtual therapy and counseling services, across the country, well, even internationally.
Exactly.
So that's interesting, just like in thinking about the positives of maybe not having COVID, but the whole situation about societal shifts, but also kind of internal shifts in how we think about and how we understand, what's really been missing, or what we've been giving up in our lives and how important it is. I am curious about kind of that social aspect that you mentioned. And so getting back to kind of our money-induced stress and anxiety, how does that impact our relationships with our friends? And I guess, what can we do about it?
Yeah, there's some really great research out of Harvard. If you haven't looked at it, you absolutely must. And it's called the Happiness Study. And they've been tracking people for entire lifetimes and then passing that on throughout their generations to track entire generations of families on what brings them happiness. And it's a really interesting perspective that a lot of people at various ages in their life, they are asked, what would it take for you to be able to reflect back on your life and feel that you lived a fulfilled life? And almost a fulfilled life and also one worth meaning or that you're happy at the end of your life. And almost everybody throughout the years, you can ask them at 14, you can ask them at 20 or 30, they say having financial security, whatever that means. So having great wealth, not living in debt, having a good job, it's financially oriented. These exact same people at the end of their life are asked the same question. And while they might not necessarily say this word, the research has shown the theme that the thing that really brings them happiness and fulfillment for the duration of their life is strong relationships. And this can be our spouse, our partner, this could be our best friend, this could be our children, our parents, our neighbors, but it's this relationship with other people. And so here we are trying to seek out financial freedom, security, and we might be sacrificing our relationships. It doesn't take much imagination to think of a person in your life who is working so that they can have the vacation for their family, and they're working until 8:00 at night so that we can afford this big vacation that lasts 3 days. And all of that time that's being given up to accomplish this thing that they think is going to matter, this big expensive vacation. And it doesn't matter. What matters is those time in the evenings, going to the baseball game, going to the soccer match, all of these littler things.
Feeling a little called out right now.
I'm guilty of it, right? So, so I think that's part of it. But then you also look at a different demographic, kind of in that, the transitional years of going into adulthood. So young adulthood, the 20s, the 30s, and there's an extreme pressure to keep up with your peers. And you see this particularly on college campuses. If my friends are buying certain things, then I'm going to buy the certain thing too. If my friends are going on spring break, I'm going to go on spring break too, because that's what we do to form those relationships. But yet this is causing people to go into debt and they can't keep up with it. And it's really quite easy to hide our financial status, which makes it harder. Our physical well-being much harder to hide, whether we're not doing so well or we're really excelling in physical health. I can look at a person and know fairly good. Are they coughing? Are they of a healthy weight? Are they able to walk up the stairs without heavy breathing? Like, that's easy. You cannot hide that. But my financial well-being, my financial status, I can hide that pretty good from you.
We don't walk around with our credit scores on our shirts or anything.
Right. And I can go swipe whatever credit card I want and I can have the thing that you have, whether or not I can afford it or not. So I think that's one of the trickier things about the social relationships is we don't engage in the conversations about money. So I am just trying my hardest to keep those relationships and keep up with what those around me are doing or the group that I want to be with.
So that's great insight. I know that for many folks that we talk to, they oftentimes have friends that make a lot more money than them, as an example. And it can be challenging if those friends want to do things that just are unaffordable for you. So if you're in that circumstance and that relationship, that friendship is important to you, how do you approach friends who have more and can afford to do more to make sure that you find things to do that are affordable for you and continue to be enjoyable for your friend?
Talk. And I know that sounds so simplistic, but the reality is we grow up, and I would venture to say most of us do this with our children too, that we don't talk about money. And the three of us, we want to be better because we know that we should be having conversations about money. But when your child asks you, how much money do you make? Or how much money is in the bank? You pause, right? And you're like, hold on. Like, that's kind of personal. Why are you asking me that question? No matter how hard we try. And so it makes it hard to have these conversations with our friends, but somebody's got to start the conversation and say, hey, I really want to be able to spend time with you. Is there an experience, a vacation that we can look at that maybe fits both of our budgets in a way that's comfortable? And I think you would be surprised that people are willing to do this. I'm thinking of a family group that my husband and I are friends with, and we make more income than they do. And it was awkward the first time we went on vacation together because we wanted to go out to eat and have the things that are fun for us and not as stressful. And they wanted to pack sandwiches and eat it at the Airbnb. And both are fine things, but we didn't have that conversation before the trip. And so it made it very uncomfortable. So the next trip we kind of talked about, okay, so what sort of meals should we plan on going out for and when should we plan to eat in? So it wasn't a direct conversation in terms of we're only going to spend this much money, but it was a conversation of what are our expectations going in terms of general budgets for certain activities.
That's great insight. The reality is that for many of us, that the interactions that we have with people are not limited to just our friends and family. They occur at work as well. So knowing that does stress and anxiety triggered by financial circumstances impact our work relationships and our work productivity? And if so, what is it that can we do about it?
Yeah. People who are financially stressed are not good workers. This is shown time and time again. Work productivity suffers. The work relationships are strained. So yes, it definitely is related. But also, I would say that this is Gallup's research, and they have looked at 5 elements of well-being. And what they show is that having a best friend or having a friend at work is one of the top predictors of well-being. And so if you are stressed and you're going into work and you're not productive, you're not focused, you're spending all of your time at work dealing with the other things outside of work, then you're not going to have that time to develop that relationship, which then means your work productivity is going to suffer more. You are not going to be fulfilled in your job. You're going to punch the clock, and that's it. Like, that's your whole mission, is to collect that paycheck so that you can reduce your financial stress. When in reality, you're actually increasing the stress by doing that because you're not developing those key relationships inside the workplace. So we're going back to the social relationships. Like, that is one of the top things that we can do in our lives, is have that close person at work that we can have conversations with, whether it's work related or not. And I mean, it makes so much sense, right? That's where we spend the majority of our day. And if we're there and we're there physically, but we're not there mentally, the implications are huge. And I'm curious how this all plays out in the virtual world.
So I think one thing I've noticed with kind of the virtual environment, and at least the people that I'm colleagues or friends with that I feel like are handling it pretty well, are just having kind of scheduled conversations times, but they're not about work. So they're calling other friends that are also virtual. And that's during periods where they're just doing some like simple like data analytics, or they're just having some downtime or lunchtime. There's also, I've seen, just because they don't have the commute time anymore, they're taking out that maybe hour, 2 hours of time out of their day that they can just kind of pick up and have a conversation with someone across the country. Or they can schedule to meet friends that are in town directly after work somewhere.
I love that. And they're finding that social connection.
Right.
When people are not able to find those social connections, we start seeing that they fill that with something else. So what are they filling it with? It could be something that's harming their financial stress. Oh, why don't I just get engaged in this sports betting? That looks fun. Like that could occupy some time. Or my bad thing is I love just scrolling on Amazon. Not for anything in particular. Amazon will tell you what you should buy, just on the app. So, I mean, there's lots of ways that we could dig ourselves into some pretty bad financial situations because we have all of that extra time that we didn't have with driving to work. And even for people who are driving to work, maybe you're working from home some of the days, and then it really feels like extra time because it's the special Wednesday that I'm not driving to the office. And now I have an extra hour or two. And how do you fill that? You could fill it socially. You could fill it financially, or you could fill it physically. And this is some research that's coming out of Kansas State University, where they looked at being outside and the impact this has on your well-being. And what they saw is for every 15-minute increment that you are outdoors, pretty much any measurable indicator of well-being increases. You sleep better, you feel better, your self-esteem is happier, depression is less, anxiety is less, you report better communication with your partner, on and on. And so I think that's the thing that we're getting into now in this virtual world, is that some people don't even go outside. And it's very easy to do, especially in the winter I don't even have to walk to my car. So if I want to stay indoors all day long, it's very easy to do. I could.
So the lesson is get a dog. And
Yeah.
then you have to go outside.
With no fence. Yeah. Get the puppy. Get the COVID.
Yeah, we got a COVID puppy who is now a great big Pyrenees. Yeah, so we've talked all about our different social relationships, our work relationships, those with friends, but I think we're all still curious about kind of how money-induced stress and anxiety impacts our marriage. Mm-hmm. So I know you've done a lot of work in this area. You're an expert in this area. So could you give us, let's say 3 specific, maybe easy steps we can take to do something about this, particularly within our intimate relationships?
Yeah, this might be depressing for some people who are listening, but it's also really exciting for couples who are early in their relationship. Here's something we know. So I'm avoiding your question for a moment too. The amount that we argue about money in the beginning of our relationship is the most predictive thing of later relationship satisfaction. It's even more predictive of later relationship satisfaction than the amount that I'm arguing later on in my relationship or the increase in arguments over that time. And this could be a year-long relationship, a 5-year, 10-year relationship, looking at longitudinal data. And so being able to have these conversations early in our relationship in terms of what money means for us, what are our values, what are our goals, is so impactful in basically an insurance plan for our relationship. So what about the couples who have been together for a while? We can't go back and fix how we talked about money early in the relationship, but we can start now. And to your question, what are 3 specific things we can do? One, for all couples, is to recognize our stress in ourselves and recognize our stress in our partners. Why this is so important? It's because when we are under a physiological stress state, our mind goes into the fight or flight response mechanism. I either need to fight through the situation or I need to run away from the situation. And it makes us have very emotion-based decisions. We have very myopic thinking, very now focused. I don't care about the long term. I just need to protect myself right now. And so if I can recognize when I am in a heightened physiological stress state, I know this is not a good time to be bringing up a money conversation. If I recognize that my partner's in a heightened physiological stress state, I know don't bring up the money conversations right then. And so just training ourselves what that looks like is absolutely paramount at the beginning of our relationship so we can cut down on some of those arguments and later on in our relationship so that we can start those conversations and have productive and meaningful conversations moving forward. So how do we recognize a heightened physiological stress? Because you can ask a person how stressed they are and 9 times out of 10, I'm fine. Not that stressed, fine.
Well, that's a standard, expression too of just how are you? How are you doing?
Yes.
Good. I'm fine.
Right.
I'm okay.
Right. But you can tangibly measure physiological stress by skin temperature. And the reason why we can do that is because our extremities get cold when we go into the fight or flight response mechanism. Do you have cold feet? That's where that saying comes from. Also, our fingertips get cold because the blood is going back to our heart to prepare for this physical reaction of either fighting through the situation or running away from the situation. And so it leaves less blood flowing in our fingers. So if we can train ourselves to recognize when our fingers are cold, and what I mean cold, so I happen to have a thermometer right here. You too can see this. Other people cannot. But you just hold the end of the bulb, or everybody has a thermometer now. Thanks to COVID, another benefit of COVID right there. Everybody has a thermometer. You can scan your fingertips. And really what we're looking for is getting up to the 90 degrees. I am currently at 72, which is kind of my solid average when talking to people because I'm very introverted and this is a little bit stressful for me. So 72, not good. This is like really heightened physiological stress. We're trying to get to 90. So in the 80s, like maybe okay. But I can tell. Like I don't need the thermometer to know that it's 72 because I know feeling my hands what 72 feels like. And I also know what 85 feels like. And I know what that feels like on my partner too. So if I want to engage in a conversation and I hold his hand, I know, oof, maybe we should delay the conversation. You can also know it when you shake somebody's hand. Friends, if you give them hugs or some people hold their friends' hands. I mean, there's lots of ways you can look at that. I also know what it feels like to have the 70 degrees hand, and I know what else it does to my eyes. I know what it does to my jaw, and I know how to recognize those things in other people too. So step 1, recognize stress and delay the conversation. 2, schedule time to have a conversation with your significant other about money. This could be every month. This could be every week. It could just be once a year. But having that time that you know is allocated to reviewing our financial goals is easy to delay. It's not really an impromptu type of conversation. I have young children. The last thing I want to do is talk about money at the end of the week. Like
Well, you do it all week long already.
Yes, exactly. Piles of homework, laundry that needs to be done, dishes that need to be done, dog that needs to be walked. I mean, the list goes on. So unless you're purposeful about having those money conversations, they're just not going to happen. So come to an agreement. I don't think there's a magical frequency, but just have the time. This is when we're going to talk about the money. And then number 3, I would say agree on a spending limit. And by that, I mean, we can each spend $100, $50, $500 without telling each other about it or without asking for permission. People always want the magic number. Like, how much can we spend without telling each other? I don't know. I tried to do some research on this and there were non-significant findings. So I don't know what the magic number is. I don't think that there is one. But what is important is having that dollar amount that you both agree upon so that you don't feel like you are constrained or that you lack flexibility or the freedom to do what brings you joy. So if I want to be able to go buy coffee every day at the coffee shop downtown, I can do that if I want to. But we need to agree upon that dollar amount. Relatedly, there's research that shows that people who have the more joint accounts you have with your significant other, the higher your relationship satisfaction. I do not know which one comes first. No, that's another good study to see, does the joint account lead to the higher relationship satisfaction, or I had higher relationship satisfaction, therefore more joint accounts. But it doesn't matter. The more joint accounts, the higher the relationship satisfaction. To do that, we've got to have these conversations and we've got to have the dollar amount that we agree that we can spend without consulting one another.
So, Dr. Lutter, thank you so much for sharing all this wonderful, amazing advice today. As we always like to end these podcasts with your most important piece of advice.
Money doesn't have to be stressful. And we don't have to make it stressful by talking about it. It used to be something very secret that we kept to ourselves, and we didn't even talk to our parents about money. We don't talk to our children about money. And that's part of what feeds into the stress and anxiety because we don't have that outlet to engage in conversations. So let's start making financial decisions less stressful by just engaging in the conversations.
Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to click subscribe wherever you download your podcasts and share the Modern Husbands podcast with your friends. A special thanks to our guest and, of course, to all of our listeners. Please be on the lookout for new and exciting announcements on modernhusbands.com. Until next time, be well.